Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Jay's Fifth Down Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jaden, and today I'm here with Aaron Freeman, host of the Locked On Falcons podcast. So I'm glad he could join me to discuss Atlanta's busy offseason. They've made a lot of moves. So, Aaron, thank you for coming on and talking about the Falcons here today.
I always appreciate you having me, Jay.
Yep. So, as I mentioned, the Falcons have been making a lot of moves this offseason. They finally have money for once, so they were able to make some good moves, getting Jesse Bates over from Cincinnati, David Onyemata from the Saints. I mean, you can go on. I mean, a lot of great moves here. So, so far, what has impressed you the most about this free agency class for the Falcons, and you like what they've been doing so far?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I would probably point to first in terms of the free agent class is, I was going into the offseason, I wanted to see the team, make a big effort to try to upgrade the defense and get that unit to, raise the floor, I guess is probably the right way I would phrase it for that unit and get them to a level of competence that we just really haven't seen from the Falcons defense in quite some time. And I feel like they accomplished that. We're able to address needs at all three levels up front with Calais Campbell and David Onyemata, at the linebacker position with Caden Ellis, who also doubles as helping out the pass rush as well, in addition to Campbell and Onyemata, and getting that secondary help with Jesse Bates kind of being the quarterback of the defense, playing that free safety spot, getting nickel replacement in Mike Hughes to replace Isaiah Oliver at that spot. So I feel like the Falcons have done a pretty good job upgrading that defense. And I think the expectations for a lot of folks heading into the season, myself included, is that we'll see competent defense for the first time in a long time with the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, competent. Yes, at the very least, competent. That's all we ask for. Just please not get walked up and down the field. But yeah, like you said, man, you want to see them address the defense. That was a huge concern. It's obviously been for the last number of years, particularly the secondary, because that's where the Falcons have struggled, and as well as the pass rush. And those two, if you know football, they work in tandem with each other. If one's not working, then the other can't really work either. It's a big deal. I mean, talk about how important it is, man. To have a pass rush in today's NFL, especially, and how that can help on the back end too.
Yeah, definitely. I think with the additions of Campbell, with Onyemata, with the year 2 growth that you're hoping to see from Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone, year 3 growth from Taquan Graham coming off that injury, and of course the incomparable Grady Jarrett in the middle, and the expectation that the Falcons are probably going to invest more resources into that pass rusher in the early rounds of this upcoming draft later this month. I do feel like, you have the makings of what could be the best Falcons pass rush in decades. And one of the things I talked about on Locked On Falcons was that even if all of those guys just kind of average 4 or 5 sacks, if you have 7 guys that are averaging 4 or 5 sacks, you're potentially looking at 30 plus sacks just from your top 7. And then you sprinkle in a couple of sacks here or there from various other players. You're looking at a 40 sack season for the Atlanta Falcons. And that's not a significant number for most NFL teams because that's a roughly league average. I think the league average last year was 40 sacks. But the Falcons have not had a 40 sack season since 2004. So it's been almost 20 years since the Falcons have had a pass rush that was league average standard. So it's one of those things where, again, going back to what we were talking about, it's just competent. That's all we're looking for from the Falcons defense. They don't have to be top 10. They just got to be competent. And I feel like they were able to accomplish that with some of the additions they made in the pass rush. And again, I feel like that unit's only going to get stronger by the time we get to the draft.
Yeah, I believe so as well. It's going to be much stronger, and like you said, the growth of Arnold Ebiketie, Taquan Graham, 2 great players there, and I feel like they're only going to improve. And the help, of Calais Campbell, another veteran to that group, added that experience and that mentorship, which is very important. I think people don't understand the true value of veterans. You hear the word thrown around a lot, but it's really important, whether it's a veteran quarterback in the QB room or, receiver, whatever the case may be, but it's just having a player like that in the locker room, with that position group, or, it could really help the young guys out. So that's huge to bring Calais here, and I'm glad he was able to come here. So now switching to the offensive side, they did make as many, but they made some solid moves offensively. Matt Collins grabbed him over from Las Vegas, and then Scotty Miller from down a few hours in Tampa coming up here. So, what do you have to say about those moves?
Yeah, I think the key for the offense was, continuing to solidify the offensive line, because that's the foundation of their offense, building, their running game, as well as seeing the improvements that the pass protection made towards the end of 2022 after a very rough 2021 season, and, kind of picking up where they left off at the beginning of the season, where it was very clear that Arthur Smith did not have a lot of confidence in the pass protection, because basically he never asked Marcus Mariota to drop back in a traditional passing attack. It was all play action stuff, and the Falcons were like at near a historic clip in terms of their usage of play action for most of last season. And I think the Falcons were able to accomplish that, giving Chris Lindstrom an extension, making him the highest paid guard in the NFL, getting Caleb McGarry on a budget or a bargain, relatively speaking, given sort of the explosion of the right tackle market, and leading to a lot of people thinking, okay, well, he's going to price himself out of Atlanta at 15, 16 or more $1 million a year. The Falcons were able to get him back on like 11.5 million a year. So I think that was a bargain for them. They still have a question mark at that left guard position. They still, I think they're comfortable with Drew Dolman as a center. I know a lot of fans are not necessarily comfortable with that, but we'll sort of see how they address that in the draft or after the draft. So I feel like the solidifying that offensive line was the key for them. But I also thought it was important that they added a little bit more juice at the skill position players. I think they were able to do that, especially adding Jonnu Smith at the tight end position, getting Scotty Miller at the wide receiver position, probably slots in as their slot receiver and number 3 receiver behind Matt Collins. Matt Collins is not necessarily a speed threat, but he is a guy that is a physical receiver, fits the dynamic that the Falcons want at that wide receiver position. One of the reasons why I don't think Bryan Edwards really took off, because you're not going to get a whole lot of volume in this offense if your name is not Kyle Pitts, or frankly, if your name is Kyle Pitts, you probably won't get a whole lot of targets and whatnot in this offense, at least based off of what we saw last year. But basically, if you're not Kyle Pitts, you're not Drake London, we're not going to throw the ball a lot to you. So what do you need to do? Well, Bryan Edwards wasn't really necessarily doing that. And so Matt Collins will be able the correction on that. And that's, be one of the best blocking wide receivers in the league. And that's something that Matt Collins does at a really high level. So I feel like the Falcons, as you say, did not necessarily, walk away from this offseason feeling like, man, they absolutely nailed with the offense and feel like, this offense is going to take huge leaps forward. But I think they solidified some spots. They got players that fit what they want to do, and they did get a little bit more explosive at the skill positions, and we'll see if they can continue to add more explosive playmakers when we get to the draft later this month.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, the Falcons are a team that they're not going to sit back and drop the whole game like they did when Matt Ryan was here a couple seasons ago. And even when we did that, it didn't turn out so well. Just luckily, Matt just turned out to be the pro he was and was able to make what he could make. I mean, Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards receiving as a rookie, and then last year, we know the story. But speaking of the quarterback spot, they move on from Mariota as expected. I think the last time we spoke, I don't remember if that had happened at that point when we did speak. I'm not sure.
I don't think it did, but again, they all blur together.
Right. So. Was that expected? I mean, did you expect Falcons to cut him?
Yes. Yeah. To me, the question was, would there be a chance for a reconciliation with him and the Falcons? Would he get the starting job elsewhere? Would there be lucrative offers to be a backup elsewhere? And maybe if the Falcons didn't necessarily find their backup quarterback, would they sort of come to the mind and be like, hey, you know what? Like, it didn't work out as you as a starter, but you are sort of the idealized backup that we're looking for here. Someone who can, competently run the offense and also help develop the young player. That didn't necessarily work out. And, I think Marcus will do well in Philadelphia. I think that's a great scheme and fit for him. I think the Falcons will also found their guy in Taylor Heineke, who can basically provide a similar type of skill set that I just described with Mariota as the backup to Desmond Ridder. So I feel like it works out for both parties. But yeah, I did think it was inevitable that the Falcons would move on from Mariota. It was just a question of whether or not he would find what he's looking for and the Falcons would find what they were looking for, and possibly, if two ships in the night or whatever, maybe come back. I don't know the metaphors and analogies, right. But you can.
I get it. I expected it too. I mean, it was just, as I've said many times on this podcast, you even with the scheme that the Falcons run offensively, you have to be able to throw the ball when you choose to do so. And then Marcus just couldn't do that at a consistent level. So you had to find somebody who did. And now that Desmond is the guy, and no, Lamar is not coming, right? Please, no. I mean, I know you probably have to, I'm sure people have just been hitting your Twitter up, and just the whole. Well, you've seen everything going with Lamar Jackson, and just can you give us a little bit of info as to why, the Falcons chose not to collectively pursue him
Yeah, I mean, I think the reasons are many. I don't know if any of them are particularly compelling to the folks that think Lamar Jackson should be the Falcons starting quarterback. But I think you kind of start with the price. I think that's really the thing, when you look at why no NFL teams seemingly are that interested in Lamar Jackson. I think a lot of them sort of look at it in the word on the street, and it's been loud for 6+ months that he wants a fully guaranteed contract and one that exceeds that of Deshaun Watson. And I know Lamar has publicly stated some things that is not the case, but it's like, sure, we all believe you, right, Lamar? Yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest hurdle in the Falcons, having gotten out of cap hell, or not necessarily as willing as I think a lot of people would like them to be, to get right back into that boat, paying Lamar Jackson. It's the idea of essentially a lot of people just kind of look at it like, well, paying a quarterback premium wasn't the problem. It was just they paid the wrong guy. And it's been interesting to see various people echo those types of sentiments, especially when they were very much pro Matt Ryan. And it's just basically like, well, we just need to pay another guy more money, like twice as much money, basically, based off of the reports from what Lamar Jackson is asking for, and it'll work out better than it has worked out the last couple of years with the Falcons. And that's never really made a ton of sense. And I think the Falcons right now in their timeline are just focused on improving the rest of the roster, and they'll worry about the quarterback situation later, which is, I think, the biggest issue that a lot of people are struggling with. And this has been the Falcons' MO from day one with Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, because a lot of people, myself included, thought they would take a quarterback at the top of that 2021 draft in Justin Fields. They did not. And they're basically going to continue to punt this decision. And all along, if Desmond Ridder turns out to be a pretty solid pro, they'll be, vindicated, I think, somewhat for that choice and that decision. But it's really about building up the rest of the roster so that whether it's Desmond Ridder or whether it's somebody else at a future date, that player is going to be able to come into an environment that is going to be able to foster and maximize his developmental potential. And I think that's the oft forgotten issue that goes along with team building and roster building and quarterback development, is that I think a lot of people, once a quarterback becomes good, we automatically just say, oh, this was inevitable, right? It was inevitable that Patrick Mahomes was going to be good because he's Patrick Mahomes and he's everything. But we just kind of we gloss over the fact that Patrick Mahomes went to a Chiefs offense that was the 1 seed or the 2 seed the previous year, that had a good offensive line, that had 2 Pro Bowl weapons in Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, that had, at that time, not necessarily now, but at that time, one of the better defenses in the NFL. And we sort of divorce, the environment that Patrick Mahomes came into from his success in the league, and we just say, oh, it's single-handedly Patrick Mahomes, just through force of will, became a great quarterback. And we never consider the fact that, when you look across the league, when you look at all the successful rookie quarterbacks, they almost always play on teams that can either run the football or play good defense. And there is no sort of exception. Maybe Justin Herbert's probably the one exception that went to a team that was below average in both of those areas and was successful right away in the NFL. But pretty much any other quarterback you look at over the last 20 years, that has been the case. And, I think a lot of people forget that and just sort of think, well, we'll just get the quarterback and all these other issues will go away. And I think the Falcons are trying to, continue to build up the rest of the roster by running the football, improving their defense, solidifying some of these areas. And then that will help the development of Desmond Ridder. Or if Desmond Ridder does not, blossom in that environment, then they can go out there and get another quarterback and feel like, okay, well, this guy will be able to blossom in that environment. And I think that's really, the onus behind the Falcons strategy for why they're not necessarily as willing to go after Lamar Jackson at this point in time than a lot of people thought they would be.
Yeah, that's, it makes sense. And you mentioned earlier, like, they were complaining about Matt Ryan's contract, but you want to pay another quarterback more. And, it's still like, and see, if we would have went after Jackson, he would have came here, and we're still having these issues that we've been having the past however many years, then what are they're going to say? You know what I'm saying? So it's that type of thing. So, my thing is, I don't even think, will Lamar really want to even come here? Like, you would even think about that portion. Of course, if they give him the money, but still, this roster just is not set to compete at the level that he wants to. He wants to win. And I don't think Atlanta's, not right there yet. And so, speaking on that point, do you think that, with the development of Desmond Ridder and the moves they made, can the Falcons, can they make a possible jump in 2023? Is it possible? Can we see a higher level of play for the Falcons next year?
Yeah, if we're defining a jump by being a playoff team and a team that can, potentially play and win a game in January, I think that is certainly an achievable goal for the Falcons, and probably internally is what they're, of course, shooting for, to be, a team that can win this division and challenge in the NFC. Again, I don't think anybody's expecting the Falcons, given where they are right now, to be a Super Bowl contender. At this point in time, given the state of the roster, they're probably another offseason away, if you assume, the best outcome this season in terms of making that push to the postseason, and then maybe another piece or two here or there. Maybe then you could start talking about them challenging teams like Philadelphia or San Francisco for NFC supremacy. So I do think the Falcons are in store for a jump, but I would not necessarily start making plans for seeing Falcons play in February quite yet.
No, of course not. This wouldn't be a real podcast if we start talking about that. No, but and not even so much like, of course you want to see them play in January, win a game like that. Yeah, I want to see that, but it's so much more like internally. I want to see, can they just play better? Can they play? Stop having so many mental lapses defensively. Can not so many sputters offensively. Those little things, right? Those little things can add up. And I want to see improvement out of the Falcons in those areas. Can the pass rush get home? Can they make stops on third down? Can they cover the middle of the field, which has been a problem? So those are things I'm looking for the Falcons coming up in the future. So, but it's been a great to see. And Desmond Ridder, based off what you saw, man, in the last 4 games, is he the guy? Are you fully confident in him to lead this franchise for the foreseeable future?
Again, if you define foreseeable future, probably the next 2 to 3 years, yeah, I feel pretty confident in Desmond Ridder being a solid starter for this team, and I think his potential ceiling is, probably higher than some people think it is. I think a lot of people, when you compare him to Lamar Jackson, like, it's understandable because, like, the floor for Lamar Jackson is right now, based off of what we've seen, considerably higher than what we've seen from Desmond Ridder. But if you assume Desmond Ridder makes a jump, I think he can start closing that gap between where Lamar Jackson is currently to where Desmond Ridder. And again, I'm focusing more on recent Lamar. I'm not talking about MVP level Lamar from a couple of years ago. So I don't want anybody to get that confusion. The Lamar that's been good the last couple of years, but has not been like playing at an MVP level is where I'm comparing him to Ridder. And so like I think Ridder should be a solid starter for the Falcons as they continue to, as we say, build up the rest of their team and keep them in playoff contention. Whether I want to declare Desmond Ridder as the long-term guy that he's going to be the Falcon starter for a decade or more or anything like that, I'm not quite ready to go there, but certainly I feel reasonably confident that he will be the starter this year, and he'll probably be the starter next year if he shows the progress and development that I'm expecting from him this upcoming season, and the expectation that the Falcons will be, a team that can, win more games than they lose for the first time in 5+ years. I don't think they'll necessarily be in a position to feel like they have to upgrade that spot a year from now. And then we'll kind of see if everything kind of comes together for them in 2024, because that's kind of, for me, where it's not like everything's going to click this season. I think with all the new faces that they added to the defense and some of the young pieces that they've added over the last couple of years. But I really think 2024 is really where this team is primed to really, get their best punch moving forward. And so I feel like that season is going to probably be more to define whether or not Desmond Ridder is truly a long-term solution, or the Falcons will be potentially back in the quarterback market within a couple of years. But I think, when you ask me for the foreseeable future, for if that's this year or next year, I think Desmond Ridder is going to be their guy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think he is the guy, at least the next couple of years. So, in our last little segment here, Aaron, is who I know you mentioned the draft earlier. A lot of ways the Falcons can go, like a lot of teams, numerous lanes they can go down here with the 8th overall pick. Is there somebody you specifically like for Atlanta to pick here, a position that you would like for them to get here in this draft?
Well, Jaden, I know if any of your viewers or listeners follow me on Twitter at FalcFans, FALCFANS, they're probably thinking I'm going to say Texas running back Bijan Robinson as the player that I would like to see the Falcons pick. But to be honest with you, that's not really the player that's at the top of my board, although I am a big fan of him as a football player. I'm just excited to see where he goes. Hopefully not anywhere in the NFC South, because I don't know if I can live with, having to deal with him twice a year for, the next half decade. But if there's one player that I would, be fist pumping on draft night at the Falcons draft, it would be Georgia defensive tackle Jalen Carter. I think he's the best player in this draft. I don't, other than maybe Bryce Young and maybe CJ Stroud, I don't really think there's another player close to him as a prospect. Not even Alabama's Will Anderson. I just think that's how good Jalen Carter is. And to be able to snag that type of prospect with the 8th overall selection, and obviously the reason he would be there is because of some of the off-field character maturity concerns that have been raised over the last couple of months. And obviously because of those issues, you don't necessarily know how the Falcons react to it. There's been multiple people that cover the team, like Josh Kendall of The Athletic. I think I saw earlier today, Scott Bair of AtlantaFalcons.com was also very skeptical over whether or not the Falcons would draft Jalen Carter if he's available at that 8th overall slot. But for me personally, all that stuff is above my pay grade. I can just judge the football player that's on the field, and he's a really, really good football player. And so he would be my preferred option for the Falcons in round 1.
Yeah, that's a solid pick. Carter's a monster on the field. He's huge. I mean, the strength is there. You see you see the tape. I think the big thing was just the off-field stuff, right? Those issues, and we've had cases like that with players before in the NFL. So, but Carter, a freak of talent on the field. So if he's there, we'll see what the Falcons do. Now, At 8, I don't think quarterback is an option, but then again, who knows with the Falcons? So, but I
Yeah.
don't think that's realistically an option there. But yeah, so I mean, but thank you for that because I just wanted to hear your, who you want to, who you would like to see the Falcons pick up in the draft. So, but that will be on April 27th, guys. The NFL draft live from Kansas City. So that should be interesting. But thank you guys for watching Jason Down today. I'm your host, Jaden, here, of course, with Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons. Make sure you guys check him out there. And Aaron, tell us where everybody can find your podcast at.
Yeah, you can find Locked On Falcons on YouTube or any of the other main podcast platforms.
Yep. So make sure you guys check out Locked On Falcons there with Aaron Freeman. Great content he posts there covering our hometown Falcons. And of course, you can catch us next time here on Jason Down with me, your host, Jaden. Thank you guys. And Aaron, we appreciate you. And we will see you next time, man. All right.